Hi, and welcome to Yin Yoga for Adapting to Change. It's my intention to use this Yin class as a tool for you to experience more ease and more peace around the changes that you're facing in your life. And we're going to be starting in Child's Pose. So for your Child's Pose, you can start with your toes together and take the knees about the width of your yoga mat and sit back onto the heels. I recommend a blanket if you have sensitive knees. And also, we want the forehead to be on a surface, whether it's on the ground or on a block. So if you do have a block or a cushion and it's more comfortable, then you can use it to rest. The idea behind this is that we want the neck muscles that are so overworked and overused to relax. You're going to be using your Child's Pose as your centering. A place to land and to come in and just take those few moments to really feel whatever there is to feel. To check in with your breath. And to take a little step back again and see yourself with a lot of compassion and unconditional friendliness, Maitri. Know that by coming into this restful practice, you're helping yourself to become more resilient to stress, more adaptable to change. The two are correlated. Also, when the change happens all at once, it can be very overwhelming. And so it's crucial to have these moments, even if it's just a few minutes in Child's Pose or a few mindful deep breaths, to connect back in to yourself and have that chance to rest. So welcome. Welcome to your mat. Thank yourself for being here. And while you're in your Child's Pose, you want to bring attention to your breath and make sure that your breath has a place to move. So you'll know that you've gone too far in a pose if your breath is impeded in any way. For the last minute in your Child's Pose, see if you can really feel the movement of the breath, sort of rise and fall of the breath. Maybe you feel it in your spine or in your hips. Relax your jaw. Good. You might even notice change over time within the pose, that the edge shifts to allow you to either go deeper in the pose or maybe you need to move out a little bit if it becomes too intense. We're going to take one more breath here. And then join me in lifting up slowly to all fours. You can bring your knees back in, and maybe it'll feel good here to stretch one leg back at a time. So you're stretching the backs of your knees after the compression that we just were in. Good. And you can also come into downward dog if that's a good option for you. When you're ready, we're going to be doing a nice little circular motion of taking the right foot around. And the heel will be on your mat. The toes can be slightly off your mat here. And you can slide your back knee back a little bit. We're coming into a lunge. This might not be your favorite pose. Maybe that's why I chose it. So if you do have blocks or a block, you can come up a little higher. It's going to depend what feels comfortable for you. That's good. Yeah. We'll start staying up tall. You can scissor the hips a little bit and then melt down through the hips on the exhale. Use your inhale to extend up through the chest. And you can either stay up here, or if it feels good to take the hands down, maybe coming down to your elbows, you can. Just don't compromise the stretch. Again, if you find that you start clenching your jaw, please stay in the pose, even if I come out. Or tensing in some way, it's better to back out and take a less intense option so that, again, you can smile, you can breathe, and you know that you're not going too far outside of your comfort zone. So I chose this pose for our theme of adapting to change because it's easy to feel for a lot of people. It's a pretty intense stretch, right? However, the intensity is not permanent. And this is what I want you to observe, is that if you come in a moment of intensity in the stretch, either you back out or you accept it totally and see if you can actually lean into the discomfort a little bit. So again, only if you can breathe and smile. You're leaning in by meeting the resistance. And instead of contracting in the face of resistance, you're actually leaning into it and seeing what's on the other side. And usually on the other side of resistance, there's a beautiful release that's waiting to happen. The breath is always the most important part of the practice here. So make sure that you can finish your exhales. We're here for another few breaths. Good. And with a little smile, take yourself back. So just lean back with the hips first and then take the leg back. And if it feels good, you can come to a child's pose or just come up into seiza pose or rock pose. Roll the shoulders back a few times. Check in from one side to the other. They might feel different. Again, it's quite empowering to see, if you do notice a difference, how quickly you can affect change in a positive way for yourself. So we're going to go over to the other side when you're ready. Swing the left leg around so that the heel is on your mat and the foot is slightly turned out. We want the knee to be tracking over the second big toe, approximately. I get the question a lot of, is it okay for the knee to come past the ankle? Well, yes, it is, and it really depends also on the intention of the stretch. But you want to do it if you can have your hands on the blocks or on the ground, or your forearms, something to help distribute the weight so that it doesn't go into that front leg too much. So again, here, use your exhales to soften into the hips. And by the way, your body has its own time. It has its own rhythm. So there's never anything forceful about this practice. What you'll notice is that the change happens in a way more easily when we're not forcing, when we're actually just going with the flow. That's all part of that adaptability. So check in with your jaw, relax the face, and And again, be aware with mindfulness, that witnessing quality of the changes that are happening even within a few minutes of a stretch. Melt the back of the heart and maybe go a little deeper for the last minute on this side. There's a pulse to each stretch. It's not a linear process. Just like change as well, don't worry if you get a setback, if you're on a growth pattern and you fall into an old pattern or get set back with illness or whatnot, you're still moving forward overall. And let those stretches remind you when you need to take a break from the stretch and then you come back in, sometimes you find that you can actually go back in deeper. You're not starting at the same place that you were. And that's important for life as well. That if you have a setback, you're not starting at the same place that you were before. You're still growing. So let's slowly take the back hip back, the right hip back, and take your left leg back. Again, with a smile, we want to do this mindfully. Relax through the thighs. Hopefully it feels good. That's the nice thing about yin. It's usually when you're out of the stretch that you get that that release of the happy chemicals. So next we're going to be coming into pigeon pose. One of the beauties of having this class recorded, pre-recorded, and being at home is that if you want to spend longer in a pose or you want to take your time between postures and meditate or just take a break, you can do that. You can hit pause at any time and make this more at your own pace. So for the sake of this video, we're going to go into the next pose. So if you are joining me, come to all fours and slide your right knee to your right wrist and then slide your foot over towards your left hip. So we're coming into pigeon. Those that know it, in yin we call it swan pose. You can slide your kneecap back so the top of the knee might be on a blanket at this point to protect the knee. And this might feel really great, or it might be too intense and you might find that a block under the hip serves you. Or you might be like, no, my knees really just don't like this pose, in which case I'll give you an alternative. So you either stay in pigeon where you are, or if the alternative pose would be to take the hands behind you, the soles of the feet on the ground, and to cross the right ankle over the left knee. Then maybe walk yourself a little closer in for a seated pigeon. And if this still isn't comfortable, too much pressure on the wrist perhaps, then come down to the ground into a figure four or a thread the needle. The figure four can also be done with a strap around the left leg if that feels more comfortable to you. So ultimately, it doesn't really matter which pose you choose. You're finding the path of least resistance to creating that shift in your body. And, I could tell you what to feel in the pose, but that would take away from the mindfulness aspect of you figuring out what you feel in the pose without me telling you what to feel. So that's one of the reasons I find this practice so empowering, is because you learn to really trust your body and to know the signals that your body gives you when it starts to get too far out of your comfort zone into a place of stress. So again, just outside the comfort zone is all we need to get all the benefits of our stretch. The comfort zone is where you don't feel a stretch. Simple as that. So as soon as you start to feel stretch, you can meet yourself there. Notice where there's resistance and see if you can meet that resistance, melt into it, and move a little deeper. And if the resistance gets too intense, then you back out a little bit and stay in that nice Goldilocks place where it's not too little and it's not too much. Take one more breath on this side. Slowly come up onto your hands if you're in pigeon pose. If you're in thread the needle on the back, you can take a little break with the soles of the feet on the ground, just resting on your back. Here for your safety, it's really important when you come out of the pose that you smile. So come into a smile. Let's make sure you're coming out mindfully. You can come to a child's pose, all fours, or maybe into a downward dog this time. The downward dog is nice because you get to press into your heels and maybe stretch the calf muscles as well. So this is an option for you. Or you can get, again, that similar stretch by just pressing one heel back at a time. Good. So again, you can take longer if you'd like. We're going to be moving to the other side. So you can do it from downward dog or come down to all fours first. Slide your left knee to your left wrist. Turn your left heel out to the side. Slide your right knee back. Square into the hips by sliding the left hip back, right hip forward. And then relax even more. So again, here, if you have your props and you want to rest your forehead on something, either the ground, your hands, or a block, go for it. Maybe you're taking the block under the left hip for a bit of support. And you can also go into the second option if it feels better for your knees by taking the hands behind you, tall spine, and crossing the left ankle over the right knee. Doing it from a seated position or lying down on the back. The nice thing about Yin is that you have time. You have time to figure out what works for you and to adapt. So where change is stressful is when we feel like we don't have time to adapt. So again, these practices of the Yin Yoga, the mindfulness, the breathing, all of it packaged together so beautifully helps us to take that step back that we need to be able to process our thoughts, our emotions, our physical tensions, so that we can get that little perspective we need to move forward in a way that's non-reactive, a way that's intentional. Think about what the qualities are that would help you to adapt to change, whether that's patience, acceptance, faith, permission to rest. Take a few more deep breaths on the side of your pigeon. On your next inhale, slowly rise up. Again, for your safety, smile as you come out of the pose and either come to a child's pose, to all fours, or into a downward dog. And take all the time that you need here. I'm going to move ahead so that you can see what's going to happen next. We're going to come down onto the belly, and if you still have your blanket, you can use it as a little bit of extra cushioning under the hips. The toes will face each other, so there's a bit of an inner spiral in the thighs. And you're either taking your forehead to your hands, or perhaps taking the left ear to the ground with the arms by the sides. So sometimes we're so busy waking up every day and having to get things done, just to get through to the other side. And we lose touch with how it might be affecting us physically, emotionally. So these pauses in between the poses are symbolic of that. That even with 3 postures so far, the child's pose, your dragon pose, and your swan, that already so much change has happened. You might be able to feel it in your hips, your lower back, your legs. From here, we're going to come up into a sphinx. The elbows are in line with the shoulders. I always like to come into a few neck stretches when I'm in this one too. I'm still breastfeeding my baby, who's 9 months, and she's getting really heavy now. So any chance I get to stretch my neck is a very welcome opportunity. So if that feels good for you too, then you can do that. Um, Another thing that I will propose while you're in your Sphinx is that you can take your right knee out to the side, but keep your whole leg on the ground. So you're coming into a right angle. And what this does, this is a half frog pose. First of all, if it then gets too much for your lower back, you can choose to come down or maybe bring your forehead onto a block. If it feels fine like this, stay like this. And what it does is it helps to create a bit of space to breathe into the lower belly and the psoas. So I don't know for you, but sometimes if I can't fall asleep at night, it's because I feel like I'm really up here in my head. And this posture helps to bring the breath and the energy down, the aponic energy, to help us get grounded and slow down. Good, and switch sides. So take your right leg back, take the left knee out to the side, if this is the option that you've chosen. And as you breathe, see if you can breathe a bit deeper down into the space that you're creating in the lower belly and the hip. You know you're doing it right if it feels good, if you can still breathe and smile. So you'll know you're outside of your comfort zone because you'll feel a stretch, or you'll feel some sort of change in your body. And you know that you're not too far outside of your comfort zone. Again, if you can stay relaxed in the pose without having to clench muscles or impede the breath. So this is a good place to be in life wherever we can. And when we can't, because sometimes we can't. Sometimes life requires us to move through a really big, intense moment of stress. Then knowing that we can have these practices of repair to come to is very, very helpful. So we're going to take that left leg back now and just take maybe 2 or 3 more breaths just in your Sphinx. And then exhale, release the head back down. And if it feels good, you can sort of rock your legs from side to side, windshield wash the legs. Then push into the hands, come up to all fours. Here, if you want to come into some gentle movement for the spine, maybe a few cat cows, go ahead. Again, moving mindfully, which means on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Give yourself the time you need. Eventually, we're going to be sitting back in between the heels. If it's comfortable, you can take a block or 2 blocks, so that perhaps you feel a bit of stretch either in your shins, your ankles, or maybe the thighs. I'm going to be here for a little bit. If it's not comfortable to sit between the heels, you can also choose to sit on the heels with the knees apart and maybe take a cushion in between the hips and the heels. This is another great option. Saddle pose instead of hero pose. Good. And take stock of how you feel, whether you notice any change from the start of the class to now. I remember my teacher, Nishala Devi, had said in a workshop that I took with her that everything affects us. So for sure, the things that are going on in the world is so crazy right now, it's affecting us. You know what? You being here, doing this right now, that affects you too. So it's a great way to counterbalance some of the stresses that are happening on the inside to go in and focus inward. It was Viktor Frankl, who's a Holocaust survivor, who I think he wrote, his quote was, "When you can no longer change a situation, we are called to change ourselves." So this is the amazing internal work that allows us to keep going. Thank you for joining me. May there be peace in your heart, peace in your home, and peace in the world.